enemy's revenge.
You will be dead in 48 hours.
A secret assassin.
You will not know who until it is too late.
A vendetta of terror on an all-new Babylon 5.
You have transmissions holding.
Patch incoming signal. Full audio and video decode.
Purple files accessed.
What you are about to see has never been shown to anyone outside the Great Council.
And so it begins. Hello, everyone out there in podcast land. Welcome to Gray 17 Babylon 5 podcast. We are here to review and discuss, and I'm sure there's going to be some discussion of the latest episode, which is Parliament of Dreams. For those of you who are joining us for the first time, welcome. We have a group of both long-term fans and newbies. The first section of this podcast will be the newbies and us talking about just this episode, so no spoilers for what comes after. And then after a while, we will jettison our newbies and talk about the spoilers for the rest of the series. And there will be a fairly lengthy discussion about spoilers after this episode, I bet. So I'm Scott, and with me, as always, is
Blake,
Justin,
Emily,
John,
Kevin.
it's Jessi.
I hate you.
I know
Andrew,
Nicole,
and Mike.
So let's go ahead and discuss Parliament of Dreams. First, we're going to talk about our first impressions. And when I say first impressions, I mean impressions. We'll go into detail on other stuff later. So let's go with Blake.
So this is where really the series started to find its footing, I think, in the first season with the cast and the stories, and also getting into the pieces of what's going to be the broader arc over the next 5 seasons of the series. So really, I think this is one of the really early episodes where we start to see what this show is going to become.
And, you know, I think one thing to keep in mind, too, we've kind of talked about production order and all that. This is the first episode that was written after the show was being produced. So the episodes we've seen so far, the scripts were written before any film was shot. This is the first one to be written after the fact. So you're getting the writer, which in this case is JMS, understanding the characters a little bit more and understanding the actors a little bit more at this point.
I got the impression from last week, I thought this was going to be like a good one, like an important one.
It is.
It is.
It's good or important?
Both.
you just don't know why.
Yeah,
I think it's the best one so far.
Really?
This is the one that won him the Emmy Award.
For best makeup, but yes, it did get an Emmy.
Oh my God.
Oh, no kidding. For best makeup?
This is its second Emmy. The first one was The Gathering.
It did get an award, but they also got quite a bit of critical acclaim off this one for one of the scenes in it.
The one funny part about this, and I was reading through the JMS stuff, he was really pissed off because they aired this episode the same night that Tanya Hardy and Nancy Kerrigan danced against each other in the Olympics. So he got like a 0.1 share.
Oh, no kidding.
So no one saw this episode when it first aired.
I just cannot get over the fact that you have said that this was a good episode and an important episode. And
it is.
I can't tell you why it's important.
Because remember, Keneally, it's a novel.
The important part I get, like, okay, fine. I'm sure there's some nugs in here that are going to come back.
We're going to have like a half an hour Beyond the Rim, just on like that one scene that Emily is liking.
Oh, I've been sitting on it for 2 weeks.
I know you have. She
my
texted me.
dumbass was like, hey, let's just watch the next one after we record the podcast. And then I was like, son of a bitch.
There's so many good things in here. Like this one.
Do you know what the last one said just before he died?
I hate this show. I'm watching it. I'm like, this is so cheesy.
Honestly, no. I loved it because it's the last days of Caligula.
He has become one with his inner self.
He's passed out.
That too.
Come on.
That you're playing all of the best shit, which all happens to be Londo centric. He's the only redeeming part of this entire.
No, there's other redeeming parts, such as.
I'm thinking of calling her right after my afternoon.
They wrote that song for this episode.
That was a great scene.
What was he eating?
This is Ambassador Jacar's quarters. This is Ambassador Jacar's table. This is Ambassador Jacar's dinner. Which part of this progression escapes you?
I have used that before at work.
So it looked like a pig's head and crawdads, but with the shadow,
But the crawdads are still alive.
Disgustingly looked like it could have been like a German Shepherd head too. So I was a little unsure of what was going down.
When he says, "You stay there," he was talking to the crawdads because they kept crawling off the plate, and that was ad-libs. You stay there.
Oh, nice.
Like it's just going to be 2.5 years of me telling you how much I hate you all for watching this show.
You'll be fine. I promise. Justin, how about you?
I mean, I, of course, picked up on the religious overtones of the show, or this particular episode pretty early on. It kind of went in like a bell curve for me with like a lot of that stuff, where at the very beginning of the episode, it seemed like that there was a lot of like almost anti-religious things at the very beginning. And then it kind of, once you saw kind of all the different religious aspects, like some of the different species on the battle station, it turned into, okay, this is actually kind of a cool thing to see how some of these different people kind of have their religious beliefs and stuff like that. And some of them are a little bit more spicy than others, and I'll leave that for later on in the discussion. But, overall, it's still not my least favorite episode, but I can definitely tell still it's, very early in the first season, and I kind of take a lot of things worth a grain of salt in terms of like production value and graphics and stuff like that, because when is ever a first season, truly on point? But that's kind of my first takes on it.
When is the first season truly on point? Strange New Worlds. The end. Emily, what do you got?
Okay, so I thought it started off funny with Jakar and being interrupted while he's trying to eat, because I felt that. Like, why are you interrupting me with ridiculous questions while I'm trying to eat? Go to hell. And I was enjoying the episode, and then we get to the scene that I'm sure will get discussed in detail later. But all I could think is, what the fuck did I just see? I really wasn't sure what to make of it, and I had to watch the episode another like 2 or 3 times.
So context on this, we recorded the last episode 2 weeks ago. We took a little bit of a break, and Emily made the mistake of watching Parliament the day after we recorded the last episode.
No, it was right after we recorded. I stayed up late and watched it. So I've been sitting on this for 2 weeks.
And then I get a text just an hour after that, just with a WTF. And she's been holding on to this for so long. So I'm looking forward to that conversation. John, what do you got?
Well, again, Londo is the greatest thing about the show. I feel like he's super underutilized, and I was happy to see him in his element, just jamming out, just proving yet again that he and the Centauri are the shit, and they are stunning and purple. So that part, huge fan of. The rest of it, which we get into when you inevitably ask everyone what they didn't like, and I usually have much longer segments to go with that. So I'll save all of that for then. But overall, not a great episode. But again, I'll elaborate later. All right.
No one's going to point out that Lando reminded you of Scott in any way?
Huh? Does Lando remind me of Scott? Is that what?
Yeah.
How?
Passed out on the table.
No.
He's become one with his inner self. I've only passed out a few times in college, kind of, somewhere at Walter's place. Okay, Jessi, you're up.
Well, I, for one, loved it. It's really turning around for me. I am going to stick to the regular, scheduled programming. I'm struggling with it. I'm going to continue to give it a chance. There were some good things about it, and the last scene, and we can get into it later, I did really thoroughly enjoy that, because when they were talking about the dominant theory, or I can't remember what exactly they said, but I literally said out loud to my husband, I said, I wonder what that is. Like, cause I'm thinking, oh, it's gotta be Muslim. I mean, I'm not sure what, but then they just started to introduce people. And I thought that was super cool. So I will give this episode some credit. But I digress. We can speak about the rest later.
You know, I said this before we got started. I really do actually love the fact that some of you are hating the show, because that's the way it would be. You know, we're watching this for the first time. Some are going to enjoy things. Some are going to get some nuggets that they like, some they don't. And some people are just going to freaking hate it. And I just hope that it gets better for you, because it's going to be a long 2 years if it doesn't.
Yeah. I'm questioning whether I'm a sci-fi person, and now I just lost the whole group. But I'm honestly, like I said last week or the week before, this is the first time I've ever watched anything like on purpose that was sci-fi. Like, I think I used to fall asleep to Star Trek. Like, I would turn it on, it would be on, you know, whatever channel, and I would like go to sleep. But this is the first time I purposely sat down every single week. So I'm hoping that we get to a point where I'm like, oh yeah, this is kind of cool. We'll stick with it. Either way, I'm here for about what are our wonderful viewers say, about 2 years.
Yeah,
we've got some dope ass followers on that group. Like the Bohm guy, he's into it. Like it's kind of cool. I like it.
So at Mark York said, he pointed out to us, there are 116 episodes and movies for B5. If viewed once a week, that comes to 2 years and 3 months until the final episode. So Jessi, buckle up. All right, we'll move on to Big Daddy Kevin.
You know, this episode's a lot of setup. It isn't my favorite episode. I mean, it's the first appearance of, you know, several characters, a few characters, but in the overall arc. But at the same time, I found this episode a little bit on the more boring side. But I know we're going to get to some more that are really going to knock everyone's socks off, including Jessi. So we'll get there. But I'm just glad that Bill Mumy has made his first appearance. So we have Lanier on the show now, and Natoth, and Catherine Sakai is here. So definitely a lot of setup going on in this episode.
Mike?
This was not my favorite episode either. I thought it was a little slow, a little dry. I found myself being distracted by a lot of like silly production choices, like the goofy like synth music that was played during the Jakar fight scene, and I was terribly distracted by the Narn courier assassin wearing spectacles. I just could not wrap my head around that. You know, otherwise, I think there probably was a little bit of substance going on in the religious ceremony that Delenn conducted, but I'm not going to lie to you, I was killing a frozen pizza while that was happening, so I wasn't 100% focused. But yeah, other than that, it was just kind of a I don't know, kind of a slow plod. I didn't hate it. I didn't love it. I'm positive Jakar was eating the meat off of a boiled German Shepherd skull in the beginning. That's all I got.
Got it. Nicole?
I think that this one had some highlights, but overall I was underwhelmed. I think it was really sexually charged throughout the entire episode. I was like, whoa, all right, everybody's got a boner in this show today. Like, what's going on here? I didn't hate it. I thought there was some highlights, which we can discuss as we get a little more into the discussion. But overall, I don't know. I felt like a little underwhelmed. I was kind of like, I could have done without that episode. I did appreciate some of the backstory with some of the characters. And there was a couple things I noted that were never really answered from like the very first one we watched. So we can get into that later. But, you know, I can see how it was probably a setup episode, but it just wasn't all that special to me. Like I said, didn't hate it, didn't love it. It was just kind of underwhelming.
So this show is just so horny. Like this show.
All the time.
It's like the thirstiest show I've ever seen, and I had to sit through the first season of Bridgerton.
That was a good show. Bridgerton was good. That first
well,
season.
I mean, because you had Jakar singing some kind of weird 1940s-esque song about, you know, missing his love, and then direct references made to his obsession with Earth women, which we've touched on before. So He's a weirdo.
He would like Bridgerton too.
Yeah, he would.
He would. He'd probably be confused by, the hottie.
There's multiple hotties in that show, honestly.
Yeah, well, I think one might confuse him more than the others.
Yeah, I kind of agree with everybody. This episode was pretty boring overall, but I can appreciate it for the world building elements that it kind of introduced, like some of the culture with a lot of the aliens that are living on Babylon 5. One thing that I'm kind of surprised nobody brought up was Delenn. We're kind of getting a little into her backstory, like, because her aide, like, she gives him the heads up, like, don't talk about, like, certain things, and it's, like, never really addressed again, so really wondering if that'll ever become important later.
We have talked a great deal about the boners of this episode, so let's go ahead and get to the cusp of it, and talk about the scene. Emily's been holding off and talking about the scene for 2 weeks now. So let's get into it. And we're talking about the Minbari ritual. So Emily, take it away.
What was that? Like, I was watching it. I'm like, okay, this is interesting. A religious thing. They're sharing, what was it, fruit or something? We're not sure. Like, okay, that is, doesn't seem totally outlandish. And then she gets to Sinclair. And just like the very slow way she puts it in her mouth with her eyes closed, I was just like, what just happened? And then, at the end of the episode, when they're talking to Catherine, who is much better than Carolyn, I do like Catherine a lot more. She was like, yeah, it could also be a marriage ceremony. And I was like, oh, because we know Delenn knows more about what happened to Sinclair in that 24-hour period. And, in previous episodes, she keeps giving him information that maybe she shouldn't. And it feels like her connection to him is so much closer or deeper than his to her. Like, there is so much additional information she has that he doesn't. And it feels like a really unequal relationship based on knowledge. And I was also just really uncomfortable with that and with that scene.
I mean, literally, I audibly sat there when I was watching that and go, oh, Sinclair and Delenn just got hitched. Oh, like, is that really a real thing? Or is it, just a facsimile? Like, is it real? I don't know.
In 5 seconds, that couple had more chemistry than that other chick that they kept trying to push off on us all episode.
There's so much going on in that episode, and I hear you. It's a little bit intense, but I love the characterization of that episode, that scene too. It's when they hand out the fruit, we have Garibaldi just completely says, "I'm not eating that crap."
Not in this temple.
No, not happening. We have Veer not doing anything without Londo doing it first, which says a lot about Veer and a lot about Londo. And if you look really closely behind Delenn when she's facing the camera getting really all excited, you can see Jakar put his fruit in front of Ivanova and steal Ivanova's fruit, just in case his was spiked. So it's just little stuff like that I love. Jessi,
I did notice that, yeah.
Yeah, it's you only see Jakar's little hand. He grabs the fruit and switches it out real quick. Jessi, what do you got?
You guys are I didn't know what scene you were talking about when you're like the scene. I'm like, what? There was lots of the scenes for me in this place. So, but my issue is like, maybe I'm just not invested enough, but I just thought she was looking at him like that because he didn't even want to eat the tomato. Like, he's like, she's like looking at him like, put it in your mouth. And then she puts hers in her mouth and we all move on. And I'm now feel like I need to go back and rewatch it and like look at it through a different lens.
Nicole.
I think Emily raised a really good point, how there's like an unequal relationship there. I almost wonder if, I don't know if she's like, I can't tell if she's like in love with him or cares about him, or if it's more of like, I hear you laughing over there, or like she maybe feels guilty. I don't really know what's going on there, but it's just really awkward.
Kevin, what about you?
I was going to say something about the the Centauri scene too. I'm sure I'm probably not the only one, but I thought it was striking how the Centauri have almost no spirituality whatsoever to them, and what there is basically just boozing it up. But the it's a very interesting contrast to the Minbari.
Justin, go ahead.
I mean, I agree with. I thought the Centauri one was actually pretty interesting because as soon as it came through, I thought this is like straight up like Roman debauchery. And it makes perfect sense for how like the Centauri are, where they have multiple gods for everything. They just do all of this, the overeating, the over drinking, and everything like that. So I thought, that when that came through, I was like, that makes perfect sense for who the Centauri are.
I thought it was funny how Londo was calling Garibaldi cute and Delenn cute. Everybody was cute. And then he just passes out. Like, Londo was lit and he is fun, and then the other ceremony was like very proper and very like almost like subtle and quiet and not as much of a ruckus, but if I had to pick one, I would totally go to the Centauri party.
Amen, sister.
You're cute. He's cute. He's cute. But in purple, I am stunning. John.
Yeah, I mean, again, it just speaks to how awesome Londo is and how shady and crappy Delenn is. But it does. So not only does it like the party aspect, but the civilizations, right? So the Centauri, right, were cool. They were leaders. They were rulers. It's all gone to the wayside, probably because they had too many of those festivals, but I'm not mad at it. And then, the Minbari, super lame. I thought it very much summed them up. And again, made me realize just how much I love the Centauris and just hate the Minbaris.
But the Minbaris is like, that's like a secret marriage ceremony, Keneally. Like,
yeah,
that's like right there.
Who wants to party with the, outer space Freemasons? Like, freak the hell with that. I want to get back to your earlier point. I want Caligula in the galaxy. You know what I'm saying? That's who I want.
I think it says a lot, though. I mean, of our three main non-human races, we got the Centauri, who wiped out a whole nother species to become the dominant race on their planet, which, by the way, they did about the same thing to the Narn. We know that. And again, it's Caligula. They enjoy themselves.
And that's what the whole celebration's about, is them committing genocide.
Yes. And it wasn't a fight to like preserve their way of life. It was a dominance fight. So for all we know, they started it. And by the way, the gods are interesting, and we'll talk more about the gods and Beyond the Rim. Okay, and then we have the Minbari, who are very much more ritualistic, which we already gathered, and then we've got the Narn, who did not participate. So reading that as you will, Jessi.
I'm honestly, I was surprised to see that they were having a festival about religion, and maybe this is just, it seems like such a basic ideology to have a creator, and I'm not, listen, as a Christian, it is what it is, but I don't want anybody to think that I'm like trying to offend them or insult them, but when I think about aliens, I think of just this higher like intelligence and like these other species, and I think that they would be far beyond the creator of all, or I can't remember, the maker of all things. So I was honestly surprised to hear the different species talking about the different beliefs and gods. And it just shows you that they're not really that different than the humans. So it was not that I think that they're all godless creatures, but it just seemed like, to me, the intelligence level, a higher intelligence would come with different belief systems, but clearly that wasn't the case.
One of the things you're going to see through this series is there is an undercurrent of religious themes and structuring within the overall arc of the Babylon 5 story. And this really starts to touch on it with the different religious beliefs, particularly within the Minbari culture, looking at the Centauri belief structures. And then even, the very end scene of this is one that at the time, not a lot of shows could have got away with that type of a scene as to what they did at the end when they did the display of Earth's religion and just had the line of people. I think I saw somewhere they had something like 160 extras were actually on hand for that scene. And there was a much longer line there from where it actually faded out. And the way they did that scene, I mean, for those of us that are longtime Star Trek fans, there was a rule in Star Trek that they were beyond religion. Religion was not allowed into the picture. And we didn't even get that really in Star Trek until Deep Space Nine started up with the Bajoran religion. So to see that in the story writing from the very beginning here and woven in into such an intricate way into this series, I think is going to be interesting to watch how it goes especially for the newbies to the show.
Yeah, I'll add one thing to that scene too, just behind the scenes piece. You had 160 extras, and according to JMS, Michael O'Hare, who plays Sinclair, was given the list of names twice and then went through them by memory at that point. It only took him 2 tries to memorize that. So, wow.
Honestly, yeah, such a brilliant scene. Such a brilliant scene. I loved it.
Real question John asks, is there Satanists? I'm sure there are. I want to point out, and I'm sure this is a decision made by JMS for reasons. The atheist is the most well-dressed and the first to go. Kevin.
I wanted to talk about for just a minute the human uniforms. I've always hated, having watched this show, I've always hated their regular day-to-day uniforms, but I really like their dress uniforms. And this isn't the first time that we're seeing it, but this is the first time that they're on display for a lot of the episode. But does anyone else just cannot stand their day-to-day leather, crappy looking uniforms? Is anyone else bothered by that? Or is it just me? Okay, hearing none.
No, I agree with you. I can't say much because, well, spoilers, but these are my least favorite uniforms that we see in this show. But I do agree that the dress uniforms look a little better. I think they look a lot better for our security. So Garibaldi wearing the dress uniform, he really looks a lot better in that piece than he does in the drab gray he's usually in. Emily, what do you got?
So aside from the whole Delenn shockingly erotic, uncomfortable fruit scene, how did they get that many different Earth religions on one station? Because some of those were like, I don't want to say small, but like maybe numerically not as large. And so I was wondering how they got where would all those representatives have come from?
You know, I had kind
of diversity.
Yeah, I had kind of the same thought, but then I realized too that you have 250,000 people on the station, and most of them are humans because Earth Alliance is running this place. And, you know, you think about it. I mean, yes, there are some people wearing some traditional headdresses and stuff like that, but I've known people who just keep that kind of stuff with them and when they need to do ceremonial things. So I don't know. The other thing that GMS point out, and you can take it with a grain of salt, is most of the folks in that line portrayed their actual religion. So they were selected because they could easily portray their religion.
That's cool.
Mike, what do you got?
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of circle back and point out, I think it was Justin who said it in the initial thoughts that, you know, in the beginning of the episode, he was picking up on some kind of anti-religious vibes. And then I jotted down the note at the very end that while that scene was kind of powerful, when they introduced it, the very first guy in line was an atheist. And the whole point of it was to be introducing the most dominant beliefs of your planet. And so I wondered if there was any significance to that choice, to that lineup.
Yeah, you know, I mean, I don't know if there's any significance, although JMS did point out himself that the atheist was the first to go. And JMS's religious background is an interesting one. Again, I do a shill for his book every episode, so I'll do it again. If you haven't read Becoming Superman, I recommend it, unless you're our newbies, because you can't read it yet. But he went through a lot in his younger years, including there was a point where he refers to it as a Christian cult, and to a point where he actually lived in a communal house with a whole bunch of people, and there was interesting things that happened. So I think, and then he did become an atheist down the road. So I think there's some interesting points there that the writer is projecting. Absolutely. For me personally, with that scene, I tend to be a humanist and an atheist. And I really appreciate the scene because I think the important part we forget is there is no dominant religion for us. Yes, the most populous religion is Muslim, followed by Roman Catholic. but that's still only roughly 2 billion of the 7 billion of us. So I do appreciate the idea that there is more to us than just a title. Justin.
I mean, I actually applaud what you just said there, Scott, about, myself being someone who was baptized Roman Catholic, but kind of considers himself agnostic or just spiritual. I think that was actually kind of a really cool scene to see at the end. But kind of one thing I just kind of wanted to bring up was the whole relationship between Sinclair and Sakai, which is, I guess, a kind of very interesting thing to kind of come up with as a new kind of love interest or for Sinclair. But the whole thing kind of smacked as a very Humphrey Bogart-esque type encounter throughout the entire episode. Like, it kind of like, when I was watching it, I'm like, this kind of feels like Casablanca, kind of the interaction between the two. And it just seemed like very generic, I guess, like almost forced, I guess, if you will, how they kind of interacted with each other and stuff like that. And like, oh, well, if you don't want to be with me now, then you soon will be, and stuff like that. And I don't know, while I do appreciate the old, I love Casablanca, I love kind of the old 30s and 40s kind of romantic type films, it just kind of was like a very weird place to kind of drop that kind of interaction into the middle of this episode.
John, what do you got?
Yeah, I mean, when I saw Sinclair and his booty call, I thought, nope, not interested in that. And then when I heard their cheesy, like, soap opera / softcore bad porno dialogue and the back and forth, like, I love you, I hate you, don't leave, I want to go, you should stay. I was like, am I gonna have to suffer through this forever? Is this a one-off? I hope she dies on her survey run? Like, I was just immediately out on all of it. I hated every aspect of it. And I guess when we get to the questions that I, again, won't be able to get the answers to, please tell me this is the death of that romance. But my fear is that it's not.
Okay. So you guys gave me so much crap about Londo keeping his eyes open when we watched Born to the Purple. And now you're giving me crap. Well, you're not giving me crap, but you're crapping on the other thing that I actually found somewhat romantic and interesting about this episode. Is you have two people who basically didn't work out, but every few years they kind of gravitate towards themselves and find themselves in the same situation. And that's interesting to me. That's, for me, I mean, that's just human experience. People come back and people leave and come back and leave and come back. But I'm sorry, I guess I'm just a romantic.
Okay, listen, you can put it on paper like that, and maybe it will be romantic, but the execution, and again, those two, I don't know if it was just the dialogue, which again, it was funny you said it was romantic. Go back and read it. Sorry, JMS, swing and a miss here. Don't quit your day job. Don't think you're going to be the new Nora Roberts. But also the chemistry between the two actors just wasn't there for me, man. You know what I'm saying? Again, at the end, when Delenn was giving the eyes, in that one little scene, there was much more chemistry than in the entire episode of those two.
I'll give you that Delenn and Sinclair definitely have more chemistry, but I think the one line that I keep thinking about as you're talking is when they're at dinner, Sinclair and Catherine Sakai, and he starts skipping ahead in what she's mapped out for the conversation, and she calls him on it. I think that was good dialogue, but maybe I'm just weird. Kevin, what do you got?
I don't know this for sure, but I'm going to guess because there was that year in between The Gathering and then actually starting to do the series that the actress that played Carolyn probably couldn't come back for whatever reason. So they just kind of brought in another actress to basically fill a very similar part because she was a ship captain. They had a previous relationship, the whole bit, it just seemed very similar. But I agree. I didn't think the dialogue was strong in that at all.
First of all, that's an Emmy award-winning production you're talking about, so show some respect.
God damn it.
I don't have any behind-the-scenes knowledge or anything that I could find about the other actress versus this one, but I'm sure, much like many plot lines were transferred from one character to another when characters leave, it's obvious that this person is also somebody who is into checking out other planets, archaeology, stuff like that. And sorry, John, no spoilers, but Catherine will be back. Nicole, what do you got?
You know, I gotta say, I'm kind of with you, Scott, on the whole romantic part. I don't know. I liked their story. Part of me is because maybe I'm a hopeless romantic a little bit underneath, but also it kind of reminded me of like, not to get too cheesy, but like my fiance and I, like we were friends for years before we got together. And it was always like I was with somebody or he was with somebody or it wasn't the right time. And we just kept coming back to each other. And now we're going to get married. And like, we've been together almost 10 years, you know? So I kind of related to that because it is a very human situation, you know? We've kind of all been there before, you know, like where we have that person. And so I liked that whole sequence. I thought it was really sweet. And the one line that she said where she was like, don't touch me unless you mean it. I really liked that. I was like, if I was single, I'd be using that on the boys because, you know, don't touch me unless you mean it, because I'm kind of shipping for them. I'm rooting for them. I really hope that like when she comes back, they work it out because she said she was coming back and and she was like, do you think we'll get it right this time? And he's like, I don't know. And I hope they do because I don't know. I really liked them. But again, I'm also a big sap. So I'm with you on it, Scott.
Aww.
I know.
That being said, what is with Jakar's pink panties? Nobody has really mentioned that yet.
See, and you know what?
I
was going to correct you at first because you said Jakar's pink panties like they are actually his, but they never actually defined whose panties they were. So they very well could be Jakar's panties.
They could be his.
They're in Jakar's quarters. He is Jakar.
Garibaldi wasn't judging at all, just being like, oh, okay, these are nice for you. You know,
for all we
whatever.
know, Garibaldi's got Delenn's panties in there from his second favorite thing. We don't
exactly.
know.
My only real remark there was going to be that don't touch me unless you mean it. Sounds like something Jakar would say. Or maybe more so Natath, who we haven't talked about yet.
But then again, we all know Jakar has an obsession with Earth girls. So who do they belong to?
Which they referenced again in this episode.
It's been referenced 3 times so far in this show. First time during the pilot, Jakar tried to get with Lita Alexander. He claimed it was for scientific purposes, and then in Born in the Purple, he was absolutely checking out the human dancers. And now even Natath says, we all know you like the humans.
Are they Ivanovas? We don't know. Maybe we'll find out someday.
Justin
Ivanova.
Ivanova. I'm sorry.
We're gonna do a whole series where you guys do nothing but pronounce names wrong. Keneally is like the champion of this, so he can lead the discussion.
Okay. Are they Ivanovas? We don't know.
We will answer that in Beyond the Rim. Whose panties are they? Stay tuned. No, we won't. Jessi, what do you got?
So like I can get down with what Nicole said because I think like it's I don't know anybody that's never had a situation where they try again. Life lesson to all of our listeners, run, because a lot of the times it doesn't work out. But this is going to be a big surprise. I'm with Keneally on this one. It was cheesy AF. And to hear the don't touch me unless you mean it. OMG, like I'm going to throw up. I got that.
Bang, bang, bangity bang.
The liquid in your mouth right before you throw up. Yep, that's what I was doing because it's like, this is cheesy. I don't like it. It feels unnatural. So on paper, again, I like how Keneally put that because on paper, it's a great plot line. But the way that it was executed, it just made me a little uncomfy.
I was going to go back to the whole Jakar and Natooth situation. Natooth, I know I'm saying her name wrong. Natath. I gotta say, I kind of hated her at first, but this episode made me kind of like her a little bit more.
This is the first time you've seen Natath.
No, she was briefly in one of the other episodes. I wrote it down.
She was not.
No, she was.
It's a different
she was
character.
not. They sent her out the airlock. They actually said in this episode, the last one fell through an airlock.
It was a different person's name. It was a different. It was the first aid he had.
Kind of close. This is the first time we're seeing Natath. That was a slightly different character.
Well, who was the other person then?
The first aide we saw was Kodoth. She was very mean and yelled a lot.
Yes,
and
I didn't like her.
Sometime between Born of the Purple and Parliament of Dreams, Kodoth found her way through an airlock.
Yeah, they threw her out the window. Got it.
And Natath joined this episode.
Okay, well, I like Natath a lot better.
I think, Kevin, maybe you hit on this. We do get 3 more characters to the ensemble, and everyone's been complaining, especially John, about how we have too many characters. We have 3 new ones. One of them, Bill Mumy, is in the opening titles, so obviously Lanier is going to be around for a while, but Natoth is a recurring character, and Catherine Sakai is a recurring character. So we have 3 new ones here, and so they're definitely building more of an ensemble as we go. So does anyone have anything else they want to chat about with the assassination attempt or anything with that went along with G'Kar, aside from his panties, his boar head, and his singing? Anything else?
Yeah, he reminds me of Dukat from Deep Space Nine. And I'm pretty sure the Narn are the Cardassians of Babylon 5.
You know, for those who've watched Deep Space Nine, and I say this even though this is not a spoiler at all, I actually see G'Kar more as a Damar than a Dukat.
At first I thought he was a little bit of a Garrick, but I don't know. Because he just seemed kind of, I wasn't sure of him at first. Like there's kind of something, oh, I'm one thing, but maybe I'm another. But I don't know. I'm feeling a little more Dukat.
You know, Emily, there is a Garrick in this show, and he ain't here yet. And
oh, goody,
he ain't here yet. And I think you'll enjoy the Garrick of this show. He's not. Blake says he's not gay enough for Garrick.
True.
The fact that they never got Garrick and Bashir together is actually pretty much the only thing I complain about Deep Space Nine, because those two needed to get in the sack during that 7 seasons. They absolutely had to.
Yeah.
And all the non-Deep Space Nine fans are like, what? Nicole, go ahead.
I did think it was cool, the Assassin's Guild, whole thing that Natuth talked about, like the whole what it is, what they do. I thought that was pretty cool. I know I said her name wrong again, sorry.
Natoth.
Natoth.
Ivanova Natoth.
I said Ivanova right, but Natoth I did not say right. But I thought it was cool how she explained the Assassin Guild. And I thought it was really kind of predictable on who the actual assassin was. But I really like how she came through in the end. And I really liked how she kind of saved the day. And I don't know, I thought, okay, she's here to play. She's not messing around. So, but I don't know. I don't know if anyone else thought it was predictable, but I definitely was like, oh, it's totally that courier guy.
Yeah, I think, and I don't find that as a fault, because I don't think it was a question of who the assassin was. I think the question for me was, how does G'Kar handle this idea that within 48 hours you're going to be dead? And we get so much great stuff from G'Kar in this, at least for me. Like, again, the passing of the fruit to Ivanova just in case it's poisoned, dealing with being worried about Natoth, who just happened to show up, and again, Kodoth just happened to be shot out of an airlock. That's where I think the fun part is on this. But I will say with Natoth too, and again, this is just from this episode, I really appreciate that she is kind of a counterbalance to G'Kar. Her sarcasm and she's not Veer. Veer very much is a sniveling, I'm going to do whatever Londo says. Natoth's like, I'm going to keep you on your toes. And I appreciate that about her. John, what do you got?
Yeah, so this was the subplot or plot line of the episode I actually enjoyed, or at least had the most thoughts about, because the beginning, I've got to tell you, what a petty dying wish. And I was so here for it, to record a message to say, check it out, dog. You done did me dirt, but I'm dead and you're about to be dead. I got to tell you, I filed that in the back of my head for as soon as I even start getting remotely old or sick, I'm cutting probably 50 messages and just shooting those out into the internet. But I also, again, we hit the Freddy foreshadow with the flower, where it was like, oh, well, did you get this assassin flower? No. Well, don't worry about it. Next scene, assassin flower. And I was like, oh, all right, come on. This is crazy. And then, when they pair that with G'Kar's just ridiculous upper torso that I could have went the rest of my life without seeing, I thought, man, we are really 2 for 2 with this plot line at the moment. And then the last thing I wanted to say with that, though, too, was I was happy and also had questions, because we had one of the worst transitions I think I've ever seen on this show so far into the Underworld scene. I don't know what, I mean, they should just use the Star Wars swipe, because of the little green whatever they had, that transition was terrible. But to stick with that Underworld again. So I have questions, and I know I'll reiterate these in the questions portion. But again, we got bootleg Jabba that G'Kar went to for some bodyguards.
The Graf.
Yeah, so he knows who he is. all the ambassadors, everyone seems to know who this dude is and what's going on. And yet Garibaldi, again, is not on top of his job and has not shut this shit down. I don't understand what is going on, but I definitely do need the backstory for Praying Mantis Jabba, because now I'm interested. I've seen him enough. Now I got to know, what the story is. And then, Jakar, the last thing I'll say is, when the courier knew what was in the message, that wasn't a tip right there. When he was like, oh, it's someone super close to you. He wasn't immediately like, oh, how do you know what's on this message? Like, come on, man. I thought you guys were supposed to be badass.
I completely agree with you on the idea of when you're about ready to check out, being vindictive as hell just sounds fun. And it's not only that he made a list of people he wanted to take out, he flat out says, I took all of my life savings that I have I didn't have enough in life to take you out. But now that the money doesn't matter, I just liquidated everything and now I'm going to take you out. That vindictiveness is priceless.
The one actual interesting thing that came out of it, and I hope that they'll dive into, was the fact that the ambassador's quarters are apparently Switzerland. Like, they're apparently super neutral and you can't really be held accountable there, right? Because he's basically like, hey, as a courtesy, I allowed you in here. But basically everything else is off limits. So know your role. I thought that was interesting in terms of, I don't know if
it's like any embassy. It's like any embassy. It's the same thing.
But I guess what I'm saying is that, to me, I smell an episode out of that, or at least I would have an episode of that, right? Something happening in there and what jurisdiction is and isn't allowed. Like, I would take something out of that.
Emily, what do you got?
I want to know more about what Jakar did for someone to do that, because wow. And if he did that to one person, I have a suspicion it's not just the one. And they talk about like this assassin group, and I'm assuming this will come back at some point because it sounds like he made a lot of enemies, and I really want to know more. I also want to know who owns those pink underpants.
You'll have to wait for 5 years of show to find out who the pink panties are. I would say too, not only do we find out that Jakar probably has some skeletons in his closet, because he even says, I'm not really worried about what the assassin's going to do to me. I'm worried about what would come out if they say what I've done. But also, this is the second ambassador we have found out who is fairly high ranking. Jakar, they say Jakar spent time on the council, whatever that is, and now he's stuck at Babylon 5 too. Blake, you had something you want to say about Down Below.
I think a lot of us, especially sci-fi fans, are used to, in Star Trek, you've got very controlled starships. There's not a lot of people on board outside of the ship's crew or their families. Even in Deep Space Nine, which was a space station, it was still a highly controlled environment. Versus what we've got with Babylon 5, it is more of a city environment. They just pulled it and put it in space. So you've got everything in there that you would have within a city. So you've got those parts of the city that are not necessarily as controlled or as regulated. You've got people coming and going through all the time. There's going to be a few episodes down the line that actually dig into that a bit more, and get into that whole nature of why those sections of the station exist, why people are there. But I think that's the one thing, is this is much more set amongst a city in space rather than a controlled starship or space station environment that we're used to in a lot of other sci-fi.
I think another point to that too, and this again is not a spoiler, I don't even know if it comes up in the show at all, but it's definitely in the Apocrypha, is don't think of this, it's called Down Below, but don't think of this as like levels in a building, because you're on a space station. So you have a core and it works its way out. So actually that down below area is the outer lining of the station, which is closest to the hull, which is why it's hotter, because you don't have as much cooling. It is where all the industrial pieces are for the equipment and everything else. And it is actually the largest part of the station. When you think about it in a diameter sense, it is on the farthest outreaches in the occupied areas of the station. So keep that in mind when they do Down Below. It's not really part of the show, but when you just think about it, it is not like the bottom of the station. It is the outer ring of that station. Mike, what do you got?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on kind of how Jakar is portrayed in this. And I think I've said before that Jakar is one of my two favorite characters in the show, the other one being Londo. I thought it was kind of interesting because up until now, Jakar has very much been portrayed as this kind of arrogant, shady guy who I think you said was set up as the straw man villain for the series. I commented previously in an episode that, Jakar talks about how he is vicious and he dreams of murdering Londo in his sleep and having his children make instruments out of his bones and so on and so forth. While Londo doesn't have any of that same sort of animosity that he holds toward Jakar. It was kind of interesting to me in this episode that at the same time as they basically lay some breadcrumbs about Jakar having a lot of skeletons in his closet, I thought it was kind of neat how the episode ends with him showing mercy to the assassin, to the guy that tried to kill him. Granted, maybe he looked at him as just, this is an employee working for the guy that hated me. But whatever the case, they made it pretty clear with the talking about how his former assistant could just be thrown out of airlock and nobody batted an eye at it. It's pretty easy to murder somebody on Babylon 5 if you want to. And if Jakar was really as bad of a dude as he comes off as, then he very easily could have murdered that assassin. But instead, he decided to hit him with a little one-liner and, what was it? You will know pain, you will know fear, have a pleasant flight. Thank you for flying Spirit Airlines. And then they send him on his way. So I thought that was kind of an interesting twist on his character.
So you say Spirit, but I think that's Frontier's slogan. You will know pain, you will know fear, and then you will die. Frontier.
Oh, it's Spirit. Spirit flies in India a lot. It's still true.
Kevin, what do you got?
Thomas Kopesh, who's plays the assassin in this episode. If you look at his IMDb, he's been in absolutely everything, and he's an incredibly good actor. I enjoyed seeing him in this episode.
He was giving me some serious Bob Newhart vibes at first. Yeah. And I think it was because of the glasses and his line delivery.
Honestly, I thought it was him for a minute, and then I had to go and look him up.
I literally said to my husband, "Is that Bob Newhart?" My husband goes, "They don't have the budget for that."
Same, yeah, same.
Hey, at this time, Bob Newhart had his own sitcom, right? When was Newhart on?
It was all before this.
What? No, I don't think so. I'm gonna have to IMDb that.
It was late 80s, early 90s.
I think it was
Newhart.
Definitely 90s. I don't know.
Yeah.
Which one? He had two. I thought he had two. The one where they're in the apartment in the city, and then the host.
It ended in 1990.
Welcome to the Bob Newhart discussion hour. Okay, John, I hear you have some hate for people that you want to share because you haven't done that already tonight. Go for it.
Well, I mean, we can't let an episode go by without shitting on a Ivan Nova. You know what I mean? Like, let's go. Listen, you can't just change your hairstyle, let it down, and all of a sudden you're a Russian party animal, okay? I'm not buying it. I still hate you and hope all the bad things in life happen to you.
You know what? Okay, hold on. Time out. I will get behind. Well, I won't get behind, but I will at least acknowledge that maybe you got something to say about Ivanova after her wooden portrayal for all of this. And just as you mentioned, John, sometimes they're just making her suffer just to build character. But this is the first time we get to see Susan be Susan, and she's the only one having fun at the Centauri get-together. She is drinking it up, having a great time, while Garibaldi's looking like he's just ready to shut the place down. I think that was great.
I see right through it. Okay, they know Londo's the best character. They know the character everyone loves. Trying to suck off that Londo juice and throw it on Ivanova. I'm not here for it. I'm not having it.
And I say honestly, that was like the most animated I have seen her in the entire series so far.
Yay!
All aboard on the Ivanova. You call her Ivanova one more time, Keneally, and I'm gonna have to punch you. So the smile was so unnatural. It was like forced. Oh, we're having fun. It was like a snarl, right? Like,
oh, really? Because like she was like drunk and having fun from what I was watching.
It looked very unnatural on her face, which is why I was like, who is this? Are we trying to make us like her now? No, you're not doing it, ma'am. I'm not jumping on that board.
I have in my head where I think Jessi's going to come on board with the show. And I also have it in my head where I think John and Jessi are going to come on board with Ivanova. We'll see if I'm right. Unless
she's cussing somebody out and like I see parts of me and her, we're not gonna get there.
Jessi, I will tell you right now. I swear to this, and I've known Jessi for the better part of 20 years now. Because we're old. I will tell you, of all the characters in the show, if I had to like go through and say, okay, Blake is that character, Justin's that character, you are Ivanova. Just wait. Blake is nodding. He agrees.
No, I agree. 100%.
I agree too, but she's going to kill us.
I think maybe that's why Jessi has so much hate in her heart. Yeah,
Jessi is Ivanova. She just doesn't want to mend it yet. Yeah.
You could have told me this 20 years ago and I could have been nicer to people then, apparently, because the face.
No, you just stick it out with Susan. I'm telling you. Okay, we're going to go ahead and start winding things down with the newbies. Last thing we're going to do is our questions and predictions. And I know some of you have thrown out some already, but go ahead and just reiterate your questions and predictions now so we can get them all listed out. And that way, Blake, Kevin, Mike, and I can answer them all for you after you've been kicked off the chat. So we'll go to Andrew first. Questions and predictions, Andrew.
For a prediction, I said Delenn is going to betray the station. I'm really hooked on that line between her and her aide. And for the question, did Sinclair unintentionally get married to Delenn?
So my questions would be, are we going to hear more about this council and the whole thing with Lanier and Delenn? I know there's more there to it. And I want to know more about that. And how much of a problem or conflict is that going to cause? My other question was, is this whole Jakar murder plot going to continue, or is this the last time? And then also my prediction is, I don't think we're going to see the last of Catherine. I think she's going to come back and there's going to be a lot of drama between her and Sinclair. And I also think that there's going to be a little bit more, maybe even a conflict between Delenn and Sinclair, just because I feel like there was something unspoken there.
So we got one newbie thinking that Delenn and Sinclair are already hitched, and we got another newbie thinking declaring that Sinclair and Delenn are going to have conflict. Cool. Let's go to Jessi.
Yeah, this is more of a hope than a prediction that Sinclair and Catherine crash and burn terribly and don't continue the "don't touch me if you don't mean it." I can't handle much more of that.
God, I need some more romantics in this chat. I really do. God. Okay. John, tell me about how you hate Ivanova and you want her to die. Go for it.
Yeah, you don't need more romantics. Apparently you just need more you need my grandma who just sat at home during the days when she's retired, just watch all those shitty soap operas. That's what you need on this show. So I have more questions than predictions. I threw some of the predictions out already, but here's some questions again that I know I won't get the answer to, although maybe this first one will. So I remember I brought up the comms thing, right? And I was like, is that a tattoo? And you said, yeah, it's an implant. And then he ripped that thing off like a magnet and his pants were talking.
Yeah, no, it's, I say it was a dermal implant that holds it on. So under the skin, they have just like this little, for lack of a better term, a magnet. It's not really a magnet, but they have it under the skin. And then they put the link on top of it and it holds it there. So it's not, the link is not implanted. The dermal connects it to the link.
All right. Anyways, I wanted to follow up on that because it made an appearance here. Also, birth number. She goes, "You have my birth number." Is that they don't have telephone numbers anymore? That apparently is going out of style. What the hell was that?
She has a ship. When you have a ship at dock, you're the military guy here. When you have a ship at dock, it's birthed. So he knows where her ship is birthed.
Okay,
that's her birth number.
I was in the Army, not the Navy. Check. Okay. So you don't say things like birth and stuff because, well, for reasons.
It's spelled BRTH.
But listen, that's that cheesy, shitty dialogue that I'm talking about right there, Scott. Look how your eyes lit up. You're like, no. He gets it. He knows the birth number. He was into it. I was like, well, that was terrible. So what was the whole thing? Is it because, so were we supposed to take, it was like her position was the reason that he can't look her in the eye? Or is this some shitty Minbari thing where like, you can't look like women in the eye, you can't look like ambassadors in the eye? Like what's going on with this caste system?
I think without going into too much, we already know that Delenn is a high-ranking individual. There is definitely a hierarchy in Minbari, and we'll talk more about it. And I think you'll get more as we move on. I mean, the reason why I didn't really say my first impressions, I enjoy this episode because much like as Blake mentioned, we're starting to get more character building and more universe building. Now we've got some more pieces on the board. And so we're starting to learn more about the Minbari, the Centauri, the Nar, and all that. So I think you're going to get more into the Minbari hierarchy and recognizing that there is definitely a class system. Absolutely there is.
All right. Now my last comment, I'm going to jump on the same prediction train. I think Delenn is shady and cannot be trusted. So I got my eye on her.
Emily, go ahead. Questions, predictions.
Why do Narn names sound Romulan or Vulcan? I don't know. That's been bothering me, especially with the 2 new characters.
Because JMS grew up watching the original series?
Well, I'll take that as an answer. I'm really trying to figure out the Delenn and Sinclair thing. I mean, I know she knows a lot. I know she does. It's obvious. But I just want to know what she knows. And then why did they make that scene so uncomfortable? Oh my God. I think that scene's going to haunt me for years to come. So thank you.
You know, I never looked at that scene as erotic. I always looked at it as like a marriage scene, you know, because they mentioned there's a marriage going on. But now, Emily, you have scarred me for life. And I will never get to watch that scene again without thinking that Delenn is opening doors.
Well, you're welcome. And that's what you get for making me do this.
You're welcome to. Okay, we'll go ahead and wrap it up there for Parliament of Dreams. Next week, we're going to talk about Mind War. And speaking of Star Trek, we have a Star Trek alum joining us for Mind War, and I'll leave it at that. And Emily's going to have fun with that one, I think. We'll go ahead and let our newbies head out the door. We will then go to our credits, and then those who have either watched the whole show, all 5 seasons, or have no care in the world about being spoiled, stick after the credits, and then Blake, Kevin, Mike, and I will answer all these questions and predictions in the Beyond the Rim segment. So until we talk again next week about Mind War, I have been Scott, and with me has been
Blake,
Justin,
Emily,
John,
Jessi,
Mike,
Kevin,
Nicole,
Andrew.
Thank you for listening to Gray 17, a Babylon 5 podcast. You can find all the places to listen to this podcast and links to our social media accounts at anchor.fm/Gray17podcast. We want to hear from you, so please join the discussion on Facebook and Twitter. Be sure to subscribe and leave a review. Gray 17 is a part of the Front Row Network and NPR Illinois Community Voices. You can find all the Front Row shows at thefrontrownetwork.com. Gray 17 is not affiliated with, and this podcast has not been prepared, approved, or licensed by Warner Brothers or any other owners of the Babylon 5 copyright. All audio clips included in this podcast are the intellectual property of their respective copyright holders. They are included here for the purpose of review, and no infringement is intended. The opening and closing Babylon 5 themes are available from Falling Matter on YouTube.
And what's out there?
The rim,
And beyond that?
the truth.
Welcome back to Beyond the Rim. This is section 4 spoilers. So if you are new to Babylon 5 and care about watching this for the first time without being spoiled, leave now. If not, we'll go ahead and dive right in. And let's talk about Sinclair and Delenn first, because there was a lot of talk about Sinclair and Delenn. Blake, want to talk a little bit about the marriage that we saw?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting. They're picking up on a relationship with Sinclair and Delenn, which is not going to end up happening, at least not in the way that they think it is. I mean, what we know is Delenn knows the background with Sinclair from the reason the Minbari surrendered at the Battle of the Line, which they discovered humans have Minbari souls. And that's going to become a major plot point later on. But what we're going to see is with that relationship is Sinclair gets very close to the Minbari, ends up on the Minbari homeworld, and ultimately will become the great Minbari figure of Valen, one of their great historical figures, and who really handed down a lot of their culture and society that comes from that. So there's a relationship there, but it's not going to be the romantic relationship that some of our newbies are predicting it's going to be. I think some of that is because the change in the series that we'll see when we get to season 2, there was different plans in place, and I can see where the original plan was heading there, but when it all gets changed, what we see it evolve into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in the original plan, flat out, they got married in this episode, flat out, because the whole point of this was Sinclair having a Minbari soul is the chosen one who's going to merge the two species, and Delenn will be his mate. So that is, and right now, Michael O'Hare is not leaving the show at this point in episode 5. And so, yeah, in the terms of whether they were writing this, absolutely they were married. But you're completely right. How this show is going to turn out is what you just said. The one thing I find really interesting, because the show shifted when Michael O'Hare had to leave, and we go into the Valen piece, is you've got a nice little bit of paradox here, because Delenn is telling what Delenn is saying is actually what Valen told the Grey Council when he went back in time with B4, Babylon 4, to fight the shadows. So the first time Valen is hearing what he is going to say to the first 9 is Delenn repeating it to him. So it's a nice little chicken and the egg thing there as well, too.
I mean, and really, you look at the theme of the whole Minbari ceremony they had on here. It was, regeneration and rebirth, and part of it through struggle and sacrifice. And you look at what Delenn's arc is going to be and what she sacrifices and the, transformation, everything she goes through for fulfilling in here. There's a lot of foreshadowing for me in this episode for the larger arc that's going to come, even though it wasn't necessarily fully planned at this point because the changes that would come. The foreshadowing still plays really nicely in what we end up with.
Oh, and that's why I love that even though we have a huge change coming in about 15 episodes with Michael O'Hare leaving the show and getting Sheridan, it still works. And that is really good writing on the retroactive side. I think JMS did an amazing job a year after this episode was made to make this all work. Kevin, what do you got?
I was just going to say basically the same thing you did, Scott, that I think the original plan was that they were going to be romantically involved. So I didn't really pick up on that until we were talking about it with the newbies, realizing that. But I really didn't see that scene the way that everyone else did. So it was interesting that they picked up on that.
Agreed. And I think we're going to, cherry pick stuff as we go. And then absolutely when we get to our conversation after Chrysalis, which is the last episode this season, we will dive deep into Michael O'Hare and what was planned and then what happened. So we've already kind of talked about it a little bit, but when we get to Chrysalis, we'll have a whole conversation about the original plan and how that changed. So one other thing I want to throw in there, because we mentioned the threesome between Delenn and Sinclair and Catherine Sakai. And sorry, John, when you're listening to this, Catherine does come back and she is integral in season 1. What we do find out is, and what I like about this, the conversation that folks had, and again, I'm the romantic, so I guess, shocker to me, how Catherine and Sinclair always meet up again and then get pulled apart again. Well, obviously, they're going to get pulled apart again because first Sinclair is going to get sent to Minbar, where he's going to be the ambassador. And then he's going to get sent 1,000 years into the past when he takes B4 for a ride. But and that's the end of Catherine Sakai in the series itself. But if you read the extended universe, which is approved by JMS, there is a novel where Catherine actually time travels back to meet with Sinclair after he's left with Babylon 4 and become a Minbari, and they stay together. So they will, at the end of the day, be soulmates. The end. What else we got for the question and predictions for our guys? Anybody? What we want to talk about next?
Well, that piece of Lanier coming in and really revering her, and then being told you can't call me by my title and you can't reveal that I'm on the Great Council. We all know where that's going. I was surprised that they didn't focus on that more, because the first time I remember watching the series, I focused on that a lot. But I think they just got to talking about too many other things in the episode.
Well, and John did hit on it. He asked why they couldn't do it, and it's actually there's two things there. You've got Delenn's on the Great Council, and for a time she was leading the war effort, and then we will find out later on that she gets offered to be leader and basically dictator of the Minbari people. But also both Delenn and Lanier are in the religious caste, and Delenn is a higher ranking member of the religious caste. So even if Delenn wasn't in the Great Council, you have a hierarchy there that the Lanier is dealing with too. And I freaking love Lanier, and I hate where his character goes. And we'll talk about it, especially when we get to season 5. So seeing Lanier now in his, proto-Lanier state, I'm interested to see how I feel watching this show like this. Because usually, again, I binge this show and I roll through it real quickly. I'm going to watch for 2.5 years Lanier grow and then get character assassinated at the end, and it's going to drive me insane. But go ahead. What else we got?
Another piece I think is interesting that we'll see is there's that line that Delenn gave to Lanier about how can I have an aide who won't look up? And what we'll hear later is in the flashback scenes when she was the aide to Ducat, who was the head of the council.
Yep.
That, as we mentioned to the newbies, there will be a Ducat show up in this show, and that's it. When she was his aide, Ducat looks at Delenn and says, how can I have an aide who will not look up? So, that line will get reused later as well, and make a little more set, kind of where the tradition was, and then that thinking amongst Delenn and who her teacher was then, that would make sense.
Yeah, that's a great pull, Blake. I actually forgot about that. That line is great, and I think it shows that mentorship that Ducat and Delenn had, and then what Delenn and Lanier are going to have. And of course, as we do know as well too, again, Lanier is going to fall in love with Delenn, which makes things even more interesting as well too. So this start out is an interesting piece. So let's go down the list here. What else do our guys say? There was Delenn is shady. As we know, Delenn is far from shady. I think she is probably the cleanest character in this show when it's all said and done. She is the one, at least the one that is. I'm sorry, is she the one that is or the one that will be? I always forget what Zathras says. Sinclair is the one who was. Sheridan is the one who is, and Delenn is the one who will be. Yes. Okay. What am I missing, guys? What did they talk about?
They asked if the Jakar murder plot would continue, and no.
No, I don't. Yeah, I mean, I think the inner workings of the Narn, actually, we don't get much of the inner workings of the Narn because in less than I can't remember what episode it is, but in less than a year, station-wise, the Narn are going to get blasted in the Stone Age. So I don't think it's going to matter much what their hierarchies are.
And I was kind of thinking about that. We all know that Lando and Jakar, have their fate, right?
Yes.
And Lando already knows who it is that has his hands wrapped around his throat. He probably could have saved Jakar a lot of time and effort in this 48 hours by just telling him that, oh, no, you're not going to get killed today. Me and you in 20 years.
We got a date with destiny.
Yeah.
Well, and I think some of it at this point, too, I don't think they had the Narns fully developed at this point for kind of because we haven't seen a lot on the Narns in general at this point, other than Jakar and his aides. We haven't really seen a lot into the governance of the Narn or exactly how that works. We'll hear occasional references to the Kari, but we don't really know, I don't think we've heard that reference at this point.
We just heard the council. We have not heard about the Kari.
We've heard the council. We haven't even heard the Kari yet.
Yep.
So, I don't think at this stage, JMS had exactly the structure and the society of the Narns mapped out like what he did for the Centauri or the Minbari at this phase.
The one thing I will say about what JMS did have mapped out, just going back through the Usenets and everything else, it was brought up after this episode, but before we got into more of the Narn stuff, that the Narns weren't really talked about religious-wise. And he actually mentioned in Usenet, before it came up in the show, Jaquan. And he says, we are going to get into that. So he was mapping some stuff out, but I agree. I think they definitely have not delved into it as much. And again, this is the first episode written after they started filming. So he is definitely still in, startup phase for sure. I think we covered it. We got all the shipping done this time. Oh, we did not answer whose panties they are. We don't know, obviously. This is not a plot point, but I want to know from you guys, just because we know Jakar and we know where Jakar he becomes a religious leader, and then he becomes a rebellious leader, a leader of a revolution, and he winds up strangling the crap out of Londo, and he dies with Londo. Who do you believe the pink panties belong to?
Jakar.
They're just Jakars. He's cross-dressing on the side. I mean, whatever floats your boat.
Don't we have a scene in an episode where he has
3 women at a time? Yes.
Yeah. He's a ladies' man, and it's usually humans.
And there's a line from, and it's actually in a Toth who has it of, Ambassador, it's not my place to speculate how anything gets in your bed.
Yes, that was from this episode.
That line coming.
No, that was in this episode.
Oh, it was this one. Okay.
Yeah, Natoth said this episode. There wasn't much love for Natoth by the newbies, and I love Natoth. Although,
me too. Yeah.
When they changed the actors for Natoth later on, not so much. But
right, yeah. This actress is much better.
So Kevin thinks it's Jakar's panties. Blake, you think it is Arando's panties. Mike, whose panties are?
I'm also
on?
going with Jakar.
Okay, I
think he gets freaky.
I like this with his little robe. You know, I don't know. I part of me wants to think it was Lita Alexander before she left, but I just hope for the best for Jakar. Okay, well, I'm looking forward to next week. As I kind of alluded to with Mind War, it's not honestly a very good episode, but it is the first time we get Bester, and I'm looking forward to talking with you guys, even more so than with the newbies, about Psychor. Yeah. And about Bester, because I'm sure we're going to have a lot to talk about. And there's a rather big plot hole that happens in Mind War when it comes to what happens. So I'm looking forward to talking about that too. Foreshadowing.
All right.
Okay. Until next time, I have been Scott, and please be sure to go to anchor.fm/Gray17 podcast, where you can find everywhere you need to subscribe to this podcast, but also you can find our Twitter and Facebook links so you can join in the conversation. And with me, as always, has been
Kevin,
Mike,
Blake.
Have I ever told you that you are very cute for a Minbari? Oh, and you are cute too, in an annoying sort of way. Everybody's cute. Everybody's cute. Even me. But in purple.